Oh my god, what is this? What's going on?
The fact that Mary, usually calm and composed, was upset and shouting meant something was seriously wrong. Even I, who had only been here for a few months, could tell, and the other employees quickly grew tense. Everyone exchanged glances in a moment of silence, then quickly gathered around Mary's desk. Mary was staring at her computer screen, her mouth agape, and she seemed to be trembling slightly. I never imagined that our bank would suffer such damage. Since I've kept my background hidden, I thought I wouldn't have a role to play. Even so, I couldn't just stand by while my colleagues, with whom I've shared months of ups and downs, were in trouble. My name is Steve Johnson. I work in the credit risk management section of the risk management department at a regional bank, not a mega bank. I'm 39 years old and a regular employee. I'm currently single and don't have a girlfriend. I once yearned for marriage, but at my age, I've started thinking it's not necessary. So, I'm not forcing myself to find a partner, and I'm fine with focusing solely on my work. Now, when most people think of a banker, they probably imagine someone working at the counter. That's not incorrect, but that's not my job. I'm more of a behind-the-scenes person, the unsung hero, if you will. Since banks handle money, utmost caution is necessary. Not only managing money, but also customer management is a critical task. It's unacceptable for personal information to leak out. We in the risk management department primarily focus on mitigating such risks. Credit risk, in particular, stems from the bank's core lending business and can threaten the bank's existence. Therefore, it requires more stringent management and specialized knowledge. I mentioned that I'm currently a regular employee without a managerial position at this bank, but that doesn't mean I've been drifting aimlessly until I turned 39. In my previous job, I had a stable position and was even trusted as a section manager. So, when I came to this bank, they offered to prepare a position for me. I turned it down. I've never worked at a bank before, and since I was hired for my abilities, I figured the longtime banking elites wouldn't be too happy about it. It would have been even worse if I were given a managerial position. I don't like conflicts, and I hate seeing others argue. I want to live as peacefully as possible. So, I decided to start as a regular employee, which is a neutral position. Even in my previous company, I wasn't keen on dirty factional fights or the race for promotions, and since I was single while others were getting married, I was often assigned late-night work and business trips. I'm not trying to complain about those with families. That kind of management should be the job of the bosses, but letting employees fight among themselves without addressing it was frustrating. That's a big reason I decided to change jobs. At that time, I learned that this risk management department was recruiting, and I applied on a whim, and they hired me. It's a coincidence that I'm here. I didn't want to make waves and was determined not to experience the tense atmosphere of my previous workplace again. Several months had passed since I joined this bank. As expected in a risk management department, the workload was overwhelming, but it was nothing compared to my previous job. I wasn't forced to do excessive overtime, and I could leave on time when the workday ended. This ordinary routine, which had been uncommon for me before, made my days fulfilling. In my previous company, the more capable you were, the more work you were given, which felt like exploitation. This environment was everything I had hoped for. I owe it all to my direct supervisor, the section manager of credit risk management, Mary Brown. Mary is a 36-year-old woman whose competence earned her the managerial position at a young age. From my perspective, she is extremely capable and flawless. On top of that, her striking appearance leaves no room for competition.
Everyone should handle their own work. That's basic.
This was Mary's favorite saying. It was her way of saying that if you can't manage your tasks, you're not fit for the job. I didn't dislike her way of thinking. However, naturally, there were those who disagreed with Mary. My colleague, Jake, who is 27 and much younger than me, often complained about Mary during breaks.
Mary is such an iron lady with no sense of teamwork. It would be quicker if we all shared the load. Don't you think so, Steve?
Caught off guard, I gave a wry smile. Mary wasn't wrong. Her logic was sound, and although other employees had their reservations, the overall atmosphere was one where no one dared to voice their objections openly. However, Jake also had a point. We are a team. Unless someone is slacking off, which is not the case here since most of us in the credit risk management section are very diligent and may not even have the concept of slacking off. That's why it's also true that dividing the tasks among everyone would be faster. I couldn't take sides, so I just agreed with him for the time being. Yeah, that's true. After that, Jake continued to invite me for coffee during every break. During those times, it became a routine for him to voice his criticisms of Mary. Apparently, Jake doesn't like Mary very much. Although he is a competent employee, I found him to be somewhat prone to laziness. He wasn't slacking off, but he did tend to zone out at his desk sometimes. Jake probably thought he was just taking a short break, but Mary was very strict about it.
I think she hates me.
Jake often said this. A few more weeks passed. Lately, we had been receiving many loan requests, making us in the credit risk management section extremely busy. Loans have to be handled with caution, but even more importantly, continuous monitoring during the repayment period is crucial. If the borrower goes bankrupt, collecting the loan becomes difficult, so deciding when to cut off the loan is also essential. Because of these circumstances, I had more work outside the bank and found myself working overtime again after a long time. To be precise, my own work is mostly finished. Even if I work overtime, an hour is usually enough. Still, I stay late every day to help other employees. No one asked me to, but I decided to do it on my own. The colleagues who kindly taught me the ropes when I first came here are now struggling. There's no reason not to lend a hand. Jake is one of those colleagues, and when I help him, he always expresses his gratitude.
Steve, I've been waiting for you. I'm sorry for the trouble I've been causing lately. I really appreciate your help.
It doesn't feel bad to hear that. I mentioned earlier that he takes more breaks than others, which is why Mary keeps a strict eye on him, but I know the truth. Jake values efficiency and works more diligently and quickly than anyone else after taking a short break. Although I've only been here for a few months, I can tell that Jake is a hardworking person. I also appreciate how he treats a lonely single guy like me, nearing 40, with kindness. The same goes for the others. Naturally, I developed a desire to help and support my colleagues. However, someone always has to put a damper on things. Needless to say, it's Mary.
Jake, isn't this your job? I know you've been slacking off a bit. If you have time to take those frequent breaks, you should be working. If you were doing that, Steve wouldn't have to step in to help you after finishing his own tasks.
Jake looked annoyed and was about to respond. At that point, I quickly stepped in to mediate. Mary, that's not it. I'm doing this because I want to. As you can see, I don't have a wife or kids, so I'm free to help out. Is there anything wrong with me wanting to help everyone with their work? Mary paused for a moment before replying.
Well, if Steve doesn't mind, then it's fine.
With that, Mary returned to her desk. As I breathed a sigh of relief, Jake started to complain as expected.
What's her problem? I wasn't slacking off. I just took a 5-minute break because my eyes were tired, and she complains about that. It's ridiculous.
Calm down, Jake. Mary doesn't mean any harm. She's just trying to make sure everyone can leave on time, even if it means playing the bad guy. After my attempt to soothe him, Jake fell silent. It seemed he understood what Mary was trying to do in his own way. It's almost 6 p.m., so I should hurry and finish my work. Thinking that, I took some of Jake's work to move to my desk when, unusually, Mary raised her voice.
Oh my God. What is this? What's going on?
The fact that Mary, usually calm and composed, was upset and shouting meant something was seriously wrong. Even I, who had only been here for a few months, could tell, and the other employees quickly grew tense. Everyone exchanged glances in a moment of silence, then quickly gathered around Mary's desk. Mary was staring at her computer screen, her mouth agape, and she seemed to be trembling slightly. What happened? When I looked at the computer screen, the window displayed, "Your computer is infected with a virus." It was one of those common scams. For example, when you're browsing a site on your phone, you might get a sudden warning saying, "A threat has been detected on this device." The chances of an actual virus infection when these messages appear are very slim. These messages are just traps meant to scare users and cloud their judgment. So if you understand this basic principle, there's no need to panic. Usually, there's a prompt to install some software or app. Sure enough, at the bottom of the window, there was a button saying, "Install antivirus software." I was about to tell Mary not to click it, but she clicked the button before I could say anything. The computer screen immediately went black. It seemed to have restarted. Everyone thought it was fixed, but I knew the worst had happened, and I froze in place. This is bad. That was malware. At those words, everyone's eyes turned to me.
What does that mean?
I chose my words carefully to explain in a way that even those not familiar with it could understand. Well, it's a general term for software or source code created with malicious intent. A virus is one type, and the one we just saw likely aimed to create a worst-case scenario for the user, pushing them to download a solution. A Trojan horse, maybe. No, it could be even worse, depending on who's behind it. I tried to simplify it, but I still used a lot of technical terms, and everyone looked even more concerned. It's unauthorized access. After clearing my throat, I said this, causing a stir among the group. And rightly so. For us, leaking customer information is unacceptable. Many might have seen news reports of companies suffering data breaches and holding apology press conferences due to malicious attacks. They were probably imagining that scenario. For a bank, trust is an essential and inseparable issue. And right now, it's under threat. The window that appeared on Mary's screen was just the initial step, a trap to mislead the user. Clicking the button to install the software and the computer suddenly restarting meant that the perpetrator had definitely gained unauthorized access to this computer. This attacker is quite skilled. The attacker must be a highly skilled hacker. Now that they've gained unauthorized access, they might have set up a backdoor. It's impossible for us to handle this internally. So let's immediately request a forensic investigation from a specialized company. We couldn't afford to waste a second. With every passing moment, the attacker might be extracting personal information. However, being a bank, we have strengthened security measures against such attacks. The more important the personal information, the stronger the locks. So unless the attacker is extremely skilled, it won't be easily breached. While the reality of a data breach was hard for everyone to accept initially, these people are elite professionals.
I'll report to the manager.
With Jake's words as a starting signal, everyone sprang into action. Despite the underlying anxiety, they each did their best. Some contacted the main office, others urgently called the branch manager, and some reached out to the security company to arrange an immediate forensic investigation. While the regular employees were moving quickly, Mary remained frozen, her eyes wide in shock.
What should we do?
It seemed she couldn't grasp the situation and was muttering to herself. Though she was confused, there was no time to explain again. I tried to find words to encourage Mary, but I realized that saying anything wouldn't help. So there was only one thing left to do. I steeled myself and shouted, "You're not someone who gives up that easily." Mary's expression changed as if she had snapped out of it. Mary seemed to snap back to reality with my shout. Her eyes regained their focus, and the determination returned to her face. She slapped her cheeks to pump herself up, and the earlier look of panic seemed to vanish completely.
That's right. What am I doing in this state? There's work to be done. I need to get it together.
That's the resolute Mary I know. But then, a new problem arose. Jake and another employee had contacted the security company to request a forensic investigation after informing the manager. Unfortunately, since it was after business hours, there were only a few employees available. Although they assured us they operate 24/7 and could conduct the investigation, there was a logistical issue. We're at a branch of a regional bank. Since we're in a rural area, even if the security company dispatched someone immediately, it would take at least 30 minutes for them to get here. Ideally, we shouldn't touch the computer until the expert gets here, but we couldn't afford to wait that long. I racked my brain. Why did I come to this bank, leaving my past behind, to make a fresh start? Though it was only a matter of seconds, it felt like I had pondered for a long time. I made up my mind. Without a word, I sat down in front of Mary's desk and placed my hands on the keyboard.
What are you doing, Steve? We were told not to touch anything.
Overlaying her words, I responded calmly. The bank is in danger. Let me do what I can. I can't just sit here and do nothing. Mary's eyes wavered at my words. In this situation, no one knows what the right action is. That's why, if there is someone who can lead us to the right solution, we must let them do so. For forensic investigation of ransomware, advanced log analysis techniques, specialized skills, and experience are required. In other words, an ordinary security engineer won't suffice. Therefore, it's extremely difficult for in-house personnel to handle such situations on their own, so in cases like this, It's crucial to quickly have specialists from a security company dispatched. In a large company, such engineers might be on staff, but due to cost considerations, a rural bank branch like ours wouldn't have such personnel. For someone like me, this was common knowledge. That's likely why the attacker targeted our branch. Once they succeed in hacking, they might be able to infiltrate the main office's crucial database. The attacker is more formidable than we thought. Swallowing hard and taking a deep breath, I started typing on the keyboard. Jake stopped Mary, who was about to intervene, shaking his head. Everyone could only watch me with worried expressions. The tension was rising even more, but perhaps due to the adrenaline, my typing speed kept increasing. After a while, I sighed and looked up. I was immediately bombarded with questions.
What happened?
I have no idea what you're doing, but is it over?
I smiled and explained the situation. I managed to protect the critical personal information. It's been moved to a secure server, so that part is safe. However, the attacker was fast, and they might have extracted information on past contracts. The extracted data only included the nature of the contracts and did not contain any customer information. There was some leakage, but it wasn't significant enough to require apologies to our customers. Upon hearing this, some people collapsed on the spot in relief, while others shouted with joy. Amidst the commotion, Mary alone watched me intently with a serious expression. Shortly after, the representative from the security company arrived. I explained the situation and asked for a confirmation. The representative, though surprised, began checking things out.
This is impressive.
He muttered as soon as he started working.
Just as explained, it seems the virus threat is no longer present. We didn't detect any backdoors either, considering the possibility of another hacking attempt. No, it looks like there's nothing more for me to do here. I'm amazed, Steve. I didn't expect to find you here.
Oh yes, it's been a while. How have you been? Since the representative and I were somewhat acquainted, everyone else listened to our conversation curiously. Later, Bob, the bank president, and some executive officers who had heard about the commotion arrived and began questioning the representative in a hurry. After explaining that everything was okay and giving a brief rundown, the representative left. Bob and the others, being busy people, only mentioned that they would follow up on the matter later and then departed. It was already past 9 p.m. Finally, Jake, who had been holding back his questions, spoke up.
So, what's going on here? I kept quiet because I didn't want to get in the way, but Steve, you're not just an ordinary guy, are you?
Jake, with his sharp intuition, had apparently sensed from the beginning that I wasn't just an ordinary person.
Well, I knew something was up. A 39-year-old with a solid job history starting as a regular employee? That made me wonder. Plus, you seem to know that representative pretty well. Steve, your previous job was in security engineering, right?
Seeing Jake's confident smile, I couldn't help but laugh, the tension finally easing. Spot on. I confessed my past to Jake. I hadn't planned to, but I felt it was okay to share with him and the rest of the team. Even though everyone still had work to do, they listened to my story for a few minutes. It was so lively that I didn't notice Mary wasn't part of the group. The next day, as soon as I arrived at work, Mary called me over. I had a feeling I knew what it was about, so I followed her without asking. It was autumn, the season when hot coffee tastes the best as it gets chilly. We sat on a bench in the park behind the bank, and Mary handed me a cup of black coffee without saying a word. Although she prefers sweet things and dislikes black coffee, she knew I always drank it black. She must be watching over Jake as well, even though she reprimands him strictly. In fact, Jake is up for a promotion. As I pondered these thoughts and sipped the coffee she gave me, Mary finally spoke.
I heard a little about it, Steve. You were a hacker in your previous job, right?
People usually call it a white hat hacker. The term hacker isn't inherently bad. Those who misuse their skills are called crackers. Oh, sorry. I almost started a detailed explanation of the terminology, but then I noticed Mary smiling warmly, a look I had never seen before.
Go on.
I hesitated, but decided to continue since there was still time before the workday started, and Mary seemed genuinely interested. I explained the technical terms I had used the previous day, and shared the past I had revealed to Jake and the others. While the term hacker often brings up negative connotations, it's not inherently bad. Simply put, it refers to someone who is extremely knowledgeable about computers and can do a lot with them. Those who exploit their skills are called crackers, and the unauthorized access we encountered yesterday is known as cracking. Because many people don't distinguish between the two, hackers who work for good are often referred to as white hat hackers. Not to brag, but I was once hailed as a genius white hat hacker. I've loved math and physics since I was a child. When I was in elementary school, my favorite famous person was Isaac Newton. I was so into science that my thesis topic was Fermat's last theorem. Looking back, those were fun times because I felt I could achieve anything. I was proud that I could use my knowledge to do work that benefited others. That's why I decided to pursue a career as a security engineer. In my 20s, I wanted to build enough skills to work independently, so I put all my effort into planning, implementing, operating, and maintaining security systems, as well as training junior staff. I earned numerous cybersecurity certifications, including some of the toughest ones recognized in the US, and my life was going smoothly until my mid-30s. With these accomplishments, I was originally slated for an important position at the main office. However, I turned it down, saying, "A rural branch like this needs someone who can respond to security threats quickly. In my experience, branches are often targeted more than headquarters, and significant information can be extracted from seemingly unimportant company PCs. Crackers are adept at exploiting security holes, and they know all about a company's manpower shortages and cost-cutting measures. That's why I was assigned to this rural branch. But that wasn't the only reason. There was another lingering reason why I came to this branch, hiding my impressive background from my colleagues. Mary Smith, do you remember me?" Mary, surprised to hear her father's surname, looked at me with wide eyes. Then she narrowed her eyes and said,
So it really was you, the engineer from back then.
In the silence that followed, I found myself reflecting on the past. It was a few years before I joined this bank. At the company where I was working at the time, we received a request. Tom Smith, the president of a company, consulted us about strengthening their security, and since I was available, I was assigned to handle it. However, just before our meeting, Tom passed away suddenly, and his daughter, Mary, who had been groomed as his successor, took over. Like me, Mary had a past. She was not always a department manager. She had once been a president. After her father's sudden passing, Mary was thrust into the leadership role and tried to manage the company, but it didn't go well. As expected, there was backlash simply because she was the president's daughter. It seemed that in that region, where traditional male dominance was still strong, longtime employees couldn't accept the idea of a woman becoming president. Unable to maintain a good relationship with the bank, their loans were cut off, and the company's finances steadily declined into the red. Despite this, Mary was determined to keep her father's company afloat and approached everything with a positive attitude. When she was president, I visited the company once to discuss a deal made during Tom's time. I witnessed a scene where Mary was arguing with her employees. I clearly remember Mary passionately explaining the importance of strengthening security and advocating for better maintenance checks, but the employees wouldn't listen. They said, "If you're going to spend money on that, give us a raise instead." As a result, the contract was canceled, and Mary and I never met directly after that. Later, I heard through the grapevine that her company had gone bankrupt. The image of Mary's earnest face, trying to persuade her employees, remained etched in my mind. Even though I had only met her once, her earnest attempts to convince everyone left a strong impact on me. But after the company went bankrupt, Mary abandoned her father's surname, Smith, and took her mother's maiden name, Brown. I wanted to know what had happened to her. A few years later, when I was considering changing jobs, Bob invited me out for a meal. He had heard I was looking for a new job and was trying to recruit me. Well, to be honest, I had been somewhat approaching them, so it wasn't exactly headhunting in the traditional sense. Initially, I planned to take the position at the main office, but Bob said something that completely changed my mind.
"We need to strengthen security at our branches, and your expertise would be invaluable. I'd appreciate your advice on this. Let's start with that branch. Mary has been actively pushing for these changes, so it would be a good place to begin."
There are probably many people named Mary across the country, so I wasn't certain. In a way, it was a gamble. Hoping that I might see her again, I requested to be assigned to this branch. I kept my previous job a secret because, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't want to create any waves. As I finished telling my story and glanced at Mary, I saw tears streaming down her face as she looked at me. Did I say something wrong? Maybe bringing up the past was a mistake. Having little experience with women, I didn't know how to comfort her and began to panic despite my age. "I'm sorry. It must be unpleasant for a woman to be followed like this."
Don't apologize.
Mary said that in a very gentle voice. I felt relieved. Mary, holding a can of sweetened coffee, looked down and seemed to be deep in thought for a while. Then she looked up again and stared straight into my eyes. Caught by her intense, dark eyes and unable to move, I froze as Mary spoke.
I'm glad you remembered that young, inexperienced president. Back then, I must have seemed like a novice who didn't even know the basics of management, right? Yet there I was, acting all high and mighty about security. It's almost laughable. There were so many other things I should have focused on. In the end, after that, the business struggled, and we were hit by a security breach that led to a leak of personal information. I took responsibility and closed the company.
I held my breath at this unexpected revelation. At that moment, I also understood why Mary had been so distressed yesterday. She must have been reminded of the trauma from that time. Even small companies can go bankrupt or incur massive debts due to data breaches. Mary had stopped using the Smith name because of debt issues. Apparently, her father had borrowed money from dubious sources to cover up financial difficulties, and to avoid debt collectors, she adopted her mother's maiden name, Brown. Then, Mary revealed an unexpected truth.
The truth is, I remembered you too. You've lost a lot of weight and cut your hair short, so I didn't recognize you at first. Others were pointing fingers at my family, calling us a failing business, and avoided us because we were being chased by debt collectors. But you, Steve, still showed up for our meeting. That made me a little happy.
Mary went on to explain how she became the section manager here. It turned out that the branch manager was a relative who, concerned about her, took her in due to her diligence. However, not wanting it to be seen as nepotism, Mary acted like an iron lady, being strict with herself and everyone else. She hid her true self because she wanted to be accepted by everyone.
Because I was the branch manager's relative, no one said anything. But yesterday, you scolded me without regard to that, Steve. That woke me up in many ways. Thank you.
As Mary blushed and said this, I felt like my heart was being squeezed. It seemed that despite only meeting once before, we had both remembered each other fondly. We're like opposite poles of a magnet.
Can you stop with the confusing metaphors?
Despite saying that, Mary had a radiant smile on her face, one I had never seen before. The anxious look she always wore, feeling like she had to handle everything herself, had completely disappeared, revealing her true self. Later, the culprit was arrested, but Mary offered to resign, taking responsibility for the incident. However, everyone insisted she stay. It was an undeniable fact that Mary's past trauma of her company going bankrupt due to a hacking incident had caused her to panic and press the button. However, the swift actions that followed, including my response, prevented the worst-case scenario. As a result, it was decided that she would start anew as a regular employee after discussions with the upper management. Everyone sighed in relief when they heard the news. Jake felt the same way.
If Mary leaves, this place is done for.
Jake would joke like that. Somehow, I was chosen to be Mary's successor.
It's already unusual for someone who was supposed to work at the main office to be a branch manager, so just accept this.
With encouragement from my colleagues, and even Mary herself saying so, I had no choice but to accept. Working as a manager in a risk management department is never easy, and there are many times when we have to work overtime. Still, we had built a great relationship where we could flexibly cooperate with each other.
Certainly, completing your assigned tasks is the primary goal.
Jake, who initially criticized Mary's methods, eventually understood her way of thinking.
Sometimes, working together as a team is the faster way.
Mary also apologized to Jake for being hard on him in the past. The fact that she could apologize showed her kind heart.
I'll make sure not to disappear suddenly or daydream at my desk anymore.
With this mutual respect and understanding of each other's values and thoughts, I was able to live the peaceful days I had envisioned.